I'm saying a lot of the time when clients see things as problems, that they can often reframe and not see it as a problem. They're seeing it as a problem because they're looking at it from a very rigid, um, irrational, possibly perspective, and then that's what's fueling the problem view. But if they just change perspective, they can see actually it may be something that they originally didn't like, but it could be good for them. So it could be an opportunity to do something as opposed to them saying it's a problem, that it's a problem that they want taken away.
Yeah, no, I'm with you. And I think this is why I find philosophy, again, I use that word too loosely, but philosophy, even faith, spirituality to an extent, so interesting and also practical though, and relevant to talk about, because very much in what you're talking about with your clients, where my mind goes with that is I agree with what you're saying completely. I think that's exactly the right way to think of it. But the devil's in the details of how do I make that determination of if this thing, if I want to push it to like a principle, almost like a physicist would do in trying to test the concept to say, okay, is the principle, the rule here, the principle here that anything negative we can reframe as a positive? And if the answer is yes, then it becomes simple. If the answer is no, which it more likely is, right? That's kind of where you went. I wouldn't say that declaratively that everything can't be negative.
Yeah.
Then it's now I need to make a subjective determination of when this is an instance where I should be reframing this as an opportunity versus it's okay for me to view as a negative. And that's where I think so many of us struggle in life is trying to make that in theory it works, but in practice, I don't know where this sits. How do you think about that? How do you help clients determine that?
Okay, well, my advice to clients is to try to not see it as a problem, because we are in control of our narratives, and if our narrative is that's a problem, it's going to be a problem to us. But
Okay.
if our narrative is it could be somewhat problematic, but you can overcome it if you did this. If you change to that latter narrative, you're going to not be feeling as bad, and as you're not feeling as bad, you're going to be feeling more resourceful. So even if it was a problem, you are now in a much better state to deal with that problem.
It's interesting because this gets to something I think about a lot. It's this idea of like functionality versus truth. And I'm not saying it's necessarily at play here, but it may very well be, because in some ways you could hear what you're saying and say, you may not be being honest with yourself that like maybe that thing actually is a problem and it's totally justified to feel bad. But it's more functional for you to say, I'm not going to do that. I'm just going to look at it as a positive because I'm going to be better off because of it. And maybe an example is good here. I'm trying to think of a good, there's numerous examples to use. One that comes to mind is like Viktor Frankl's book and the whole idea of people that were there. I have a wife who has multiple sclerosis, a pretty severe case of it. And life is daily a struggle for her. And I think she often battles with this of saying, I can understand conceptually, I shouldn't wallow in the negative of this. I should see it as an opportunity, right? That's what people say.
Yeah.
But it's very hard for her to realize that and embody it because it
Okay.
feels negative. How do you
Okay.
handle those types of situations?
Okay. Well, so I handle those kind of objections with like someone saying, well, how do I if I see something as negative and I'm trying to see it as a positive, how do I know I'm not lying to myself? How do I
Sure.
know I'm not fooling myself? And I'm like,
Yes,
well, how do you know you haven't already fooled yourself into seeing it as negative?
that's fair. That's fair. But to the point, you actually don't know on either way. You don't have
Exactly.
any confidence to say either way. So is the next part of that thread, you may as well view it as a positive because that's
No,
going to
no, no. I'm saying the first thing that we should do is to dismantle the bad feeling, because if we have a bad feeling, we're not going to be resourceful anyway. So I'm not even if we kind of step aside from the problem or opportunity for a sec, if we dismantle the bad feeling that we've now kind of attached to it, we'll be
yes.
much more likely to accurately assess what it is and then deal with it.
Hmm. Hmm. Yeah, there's such an undertone. Like I think the words fail me often. I don't know if the word is right, is logical, but the logical part of me hears what you're saying and says, yeah, you're absolutely right. The more objective we can be about the situation we're dealing with, the better we'll be able to more efficiently deal with it. And emotions, good or bad, frankly, often take away our clarity. They take away our
Yeah,
objectiveness,
yeah,
right? So
definitely.
if we can dismantle that and see it for what it is,
Yeah.
then we can move forward. There's a less logical side of me, call it what you will. I don't know what to call it, that says, but there's something important about us recognizing negative in the world. And it goes back to the theories probably from before, and I can't logically explain it, but there's something about like, if I can't recognize, so let me give maybe the most potent example I could think of on this, and let's I've talked about it before on the show, but I'll say it again. So I was reading a book once, and they were talking about slavery in the U.S. And there was this picture, somebody's diary entry or something was this picture of a woman. They were at a slave auction, and this woman who had been sold into slavery, was in shackles, was literally on the floor crying as she looked up at a man dangling her baby in front of her to sell. And the baby was sold off to somebody else, as this woman was presumably going to go be tortured, abused, raped for the rest of her life, and knowing that her son or daughter, whatever it was going to have a similar life and they were going to be separated. I think of a moment like that, and I think, if I can't feel negative emotion about that, then I'm not sure that life is worth living, because that is so horrific to imagine. And how do we deal with a situation like that in the framework that you're saying?